We will wait for a minute or so, and then we can begin.
Okay.
All right, so thank you very much. It's great to see such a good turnout at this presentation, which soon will be delivered by Dr. Doug Chivers for the role of the Associate Vice President, Research, Ethics and Infrastructure. And these meetings and gatherings also give us an opportunity to reflect on the land of the First Nations, which is the Treaty 6 lands and also territories, and also this is the home to the Métis Nation, and really deeply for a moment reflecting on our the need and the commitment that we demonstrate to building better relationships, respectful relationships, and the relationships that move all of us forward, and with a determination that we have a future which will be far better than the past, that we continue to understand and find ways to make things better for everyone. So reflecting on the ancestors who lived on this land is a source of inspiration for all of us, and the wisdom and the knowledge that we gain from those engagements. And this is the second of the 5 presentations for the 2 positions of the Associate Vice President Research, which were announced a few months ago. And we have Dr. Doug Chivers, who is a professor in College of Arts and Science and is very well-known researcher on our campus. We all know, since this is an internal competition, the candidates are our colleagues from within the university, and very likely we have met them, known of their work, and worked with them as teachers or scholars or on committees. Dr. Doug Chivers is also a member of a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, and he will be delivering a 25-minute presentation today that will allow us nearly similar amount of time to engage in questions, answer, discussion with him. The session that we are in today will be recorded and placed on the website, where we are sharing the information about the search and the selection process for these particular roles. And if there are any technical issues, please do send a quick email or a chat to Christopher Martins, who will be happy to help us. And towards the end of the presentation, I will provide a few more housekeeping notes on how to share your feedback on the candidates for these roles. At this moment, I would like to invite Dr. Chivers to speak to the 2-part question that has been given to each of the shortlisted candidates. The first one is, what are the greatest challenges and opportunities related to research, scholarly, and the artistic work at our university? And given this, how will your leadership as AVPR, ethics and infrastructure, help us become the university the world needs? So with these comments, I pass it over to Dr. Chivers to begin his presentation. And thank you very much, Doug, for putting your name forward, and look forward to hearing your presentation. Also request everybody to turn your microphones and videos off during the presentation, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a great Labor Day long weekend. Thanks, Dr. Singh, for that introduction. It's really a great opportunity to come here and address you all today. I'm a pretty social person, so I really wish we were on campus and doing this in person, but hopefully soon we'll be returning fully to the campus. So I've got my screen shared with everyone there, so I hope everybody can see it. So what I thought I'd do today is talk about my vision really for research, scholarly, and artistic work at the University of Saskatchewan. And as Dr. Singh just sort of told us, this was the question they posed. He said, so what are the greatest challenges and opportunities related to research, scholarly, and artistic work at the University of Saskatchewan? And given this, how will your leadership as Associate Vice President help us become the university the world needs? So that was the question that was posed to us. And so I pondered that question for a little while. Obviously, this is all about ethics and infrastructure. And I'm really quite passionate about both of those topics. And I could tell you why. And it's probably not exactly the best story, but really dealing with issues with the administration of animal care and dealing with inadequate infrastructure have been the two biggest sources of frustration that I've had in my career. Okay, I've had a successful career at the university, but I've had quite a bit of frustration around these two particular topics. So rather than just being part of the people who are complaining about it, I thought I would maybe try to do something about it. So when I think about that question, in some ways, one of the things I think about is it's the fact that it's a little bit of a trick question. And I say it's a bit of a trick question for me because it's all about ethics and infrastructure. Okay, but for me, this role is much bigger than that. It's really a bigger role. And so I see myself as being somebody that would be building an engaged, thriving research culture on this campus. And everything we do at this university, all the stuff we do in the OVPR office, lots of the dean's office, is really going to be enhancing that particular culture or alternatively taking away from that particular culture. So I'm going to talk about building that research culture. And again, keep in mind that this is a multi-pronged approach, requires long-term thinking. This is not something that's ever going to be done. We're always going to be building that vibrant research culture. So it's kind of like a forever project that we have to get our head around. So first of all, what do we need to do? Well, first of all, I think we need to be attracting and retaining exceptional leaders. And that starts in the departments, it starts in the hallways, it starts basically where faculty are mentoring their junior colleagues, people right next door. That goes right up on the line. And it doesn't stop really at the Office of the Vice President of Research. It doesn't stop with the president, but it goes right through to the Board of Governors, because they're the ones who are going to be setting the boundaries for this culture of research that we have. Okay, next thing I think was we need a deliberate and thoughtful approach to ethics administration. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of my experience being on a member of the ethics board and chair of the animal care committee for several years. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, I think the next thing we need to do, of course, is to prioritize long-term planning of our critical infrastructure. Okay, so we need renewal of that critical infrastructure. I think, unfortunately, on this campus, there's been a little bit of ad hoc planning, and unfortunately, we've had budget realities that have come into play here. But I do think we need to really prioritize that long-term planning and renewal in this context. So I'm going to spend some time talking mostly about those three different things, but I want you to get the idea that, to me, this is about building a culture, and I want to just keep going back to that idea. So something you need to know about me: I'm pretty passionate about supervision of graduate students and postdocs. That's really where I saw myself at this university. So there's a picture of about half of the grad students I've had. I've had about 50 graduate students over the years, and I've been really fortunate in the sense that I've had great students, but I've also been fortunate in the sense that I've been able to attract funding to support large numbers of those students. Okay. This is becoming particularly important. I think I would just suggest that graduate funding is largely inadequate on this campus still. I think that's an unfortunate situation, particularly given if you think that people who, like me, get funding from NSERC, and a third of our grant score now is basically all around how many highly qualified personnel that somebody has in their lab. So I've been on our graduate studies committee for almost my entire career. I spent 8 years chairing the GSC. I sat on the Arts and Science Committee on grad funding. And so I'm really just trying to always highlight this idea. And I highlight it for the very simple reason. If we're building a culture, we have to get our head around the first and most important thing. And that is that graduate student and postdocs are the engine of university research. Okay, so prioritizing funding is absolutely critical for this culture I'm trying to talk about building. Okay, we have a College of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, and we have virtually no support for postdocs. Okay, that is very much, I think, a problem for me in that sense. So I think certainly we should be trying to look to get more number of postdocs here. So one of the things I do is I sit on the Royal Society of Canada Fellows Selection Committee, where we pick the fellows each year. And I could just tell you a theme that comes across every single year is the successful nominees end up with large numbers of postdocs in their lab. And this is a critical component that seems to be missing in large portions of the university. So I think we really do need to address that particular shortfall. Okay, so when I think about building this engaged, thriving research culture, graduate student postdoc funding is right up there. Okay, I also think we need to identify key areas for research growth within our ever-changing fiscal reality. Okay, this university cannot do everything. There's no university I know of out there in the world that's got the finances to do everything. So we need to prioritize things, and I think that is what I really suggest we do here. So I'm an aquatic biologist. I contributed to our first application for our very first ever CERC chair at the university. Was this investment in our strength and water resources a great idea? Absolutely, I think it was. The question is going to be, what are our new strengths? Okay, and I'm not sure what the answer to that question is going to be, but I do know that we can't do everything for everybody, and we need to start to identify strengths. Now, I know for some faculty that's a bit of a tough pill to swallow. Okay, particularly if you're an individual that doesn't really see themselves fitting into signature areas. But reality is simple. We just can't do everything for everybody. And so I've pondered myself this question a few times and asked myself whether we have too many academic units. Are we spreading ourselves too thin? Those sorts of things. Okay, the next thing is we need to proactively respond to the unique circumstances of researchers at different stages in their career, different disciplines and different backgrounds. Okay, so one of the major tasks I had when I chaired the Faculty Association for a number of years was to have meetings with new faculty. Basically, I oriented them to the university, talked all about standards, and talked about issues that they were having. And it turns out, year after year, there was this overwhelming theme that I kept hearing, and it was kind of excessive frustration of not having research facilities ready when they started. And to me, this is a simple infrastructure issue. Okay, so I met with somebody, first story, I met with somebody in their first year. They told me they were all excited to be here, and all they needed to do was get their lab paint and they would start their research. Okay, well, it turns out the next year I was having the exact same conversation with the individual, and I found myself offering kind of tongue-in-cheek to help to go paint the wall. Okay, we have many people around this campus that start in July. Within their first year, they can get their funding all in place, and then they have to wait for a year or two to get their research labs ready and operational. So we have to think about what that means. What does this sort of infrastructure failure mean to us? Okay, well, what it means is that people are burning years of their grant, time keeps on ticking away, and they're losing their competitiveness compared to others across the country. Okay, that means we can expect them to have fewer graduate students in the next round. Okay, that means they're going to have less productivity, and pretty soon we're in a vicious circle that's very hard to get past. Okay, so realize right off the bat, we could be crippling people's research careers right from the very beginning. And this is a simple infrastructure issue, okay, that I think we need to address. Okay, now I don't want you to get the impression that these are one-off stories, because I've met with hundreds of new faculty as they come on this campus over the last decade or so, and I could tell you that this is unfortunately a little bit more of the norm than the exception in this case. Okay, my own personal experience, I had a CFI grant, an infrastructure grant, and it was almost canceled because we got to the 5-year point and the facility was not operational. Okay, I think we need to have some consistent policies, oftentimes for getting people started. Okay, so some colleges and departments have great teaching releases that they give to people. Okay, others don't, perhaps because of funding constraints. But I certainly think giving people a kickstart, a head start here would be definitely what we would like to do in terms of concentrating some resources. If we're interested, if we're seriously interested in building that thriving research culture, it starts on day one. Okay, it even probably starts before people even arrive at the university. Okay, I think we also maybe should get to the realization that some of our mid-career researchers have lost a little bit of momentum. And certainly I think some targeted investment here, perhaps it's teaching releases, perhaps it's a small amount of seed money, perhaps that's all the nudge that is needed to get these people back on track and contributing positively to the research culture that we have. Okay, if somebody is struggling, what we tend to have a tendency to do is to pile on more teaching because the person is not really being seen as productive. Okay, so more research or more teaching means less research time, less research time means less productivity, and less chance that the person will ever be contributing really to that engaged research culture. Okay, I think we need to proactively respond to the needs of people with different backgrounds. Okay, and certainly when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking of our Indigenous faculty. So over the past number of years, I've met with large numbers of Indigenous faculty. Last year, the USFA had a working group to discuss issues. And I came away with that with this very clear idea that we need to address some systematic barriers that are standing in the way of building this vibrant research culture. Okay, perhaps we need to embrace more oral traditions, move away from that heavy reliance on written communications as an academic yardstick, things like that. Okay, so let's get to the first three things that I talked about. Okay, so the first one is attracting and retaining exceptional leaders. So to me, leadership is all about building relationships. If you're a good leader, you're always working on your relationships with other people. That's what it's about to me. Okay, that means listening to people and emphasizing honesty with them and emphasizing respect. Okay, even if in a disagreement, if you treat people with honesty and respect, it goes a long way. Okay, so it means being an excellent role model as a researcher, and I hope I can act in that way as a model researcher. And it's also about inspiring other people to excellence. Okay, and again, just what I talked about at the beginning, I want to make sure you get the idea that I talked about. It goes straight from the hallway all the way up to the Board of Governors. So whoever is sitting in those chairs and are on the board really does set that culture and that for our leadership in this context. Okay, so I'm going to talk about leadership really when I talk about ethics and infrastructure. So I'm just going to switch there. Let's talk a little bit about ethics. Okay, I think we need a very deliberate, very thoughtful approach to ethics administration. I told you at the beginning here that this is one of the biggest sources of frustration in my career, and I'm not going to get into all the specifics, not going to sort of tell stories, but everybody's heard the saying, a death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, this is a little bit more like a death by 1,000 emails. Okay, so let me tell you another story. My first major administrative task was being an arts and science representative to the University Committee on Animal Care and Supply. Okay, and if you don't know how that committee works, it goes something like this. Everybody gets a copy of protocols. Somebody's in charge of presenting it to the committee. And during the meeting, the committee discusses the protocol and approves it or denies it. Or alternatively, they ask questions and clarifications. Okay, so being naive, I got there, my very first meeting, we were discussing somebody's protocol, and there was lots of questions being asked, and they were very, very interesting questions. But in my opinion, they weren't critical questions for us to be able to approve the protocol. So at the end of the discussion, I posed this question to everybody. I said, does the answer the person give us to this question going to determine whether or not we approve the protocol or not? Okay, I thought I was missing something. We're going to deny the protocol if they gave us one answer, approve it if they gave us another answer. Well, it turns out the committee was just curious. Okay, if you put 10 academics in a room and get them to discuss something for a long time, of course they come up with lots of questions. That's our bread and butter as faculty, is to ask questions. Okay, so in this case, rather than postponing that particular approval for the next month, we approved the protocol, and the committee sent a message that they would really like to know the answer to these interesting questions. Okay, now that same scenario happened to me 3 or 4 times over the next couple of meetings. And I remember leaving those meetings and pondering to myself whether I was missing something. Okay, was there something about this committee I was missing? What was the purpose of the committee? And so I found myself asking that about that committee. And I was a little bit bothered by the fact that we seem to be content in some ways to perhaps impede research rather than facilitate it. And that wasn't really what I thought the job was all about. Okay, so I think it's really critical for people asking questions. And I don't want this to come across as sounding like a negative against people. These are people who are asking really legitimate, interesting questions. But the question is, were they really relevant? Okay, I can tell you that this death by 1,000 emails has become problematic. It has driven people away from the university. Okay, around the time this was all happening, I remember one of our rising stars in the College of Medicine, and they left as a direct result of our over-ministering of animal care. Okay, if you know your history of the College of Medicine, you might be able to figure out who I mean. They were just elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society. Okay, an absolutely great researcher who left the University of Saskatchewan, left our College of Medicine, and left because of our culture of ethics administration. Say, as the next 2 or 3 years went by after I got onto that committee, I think the perspective changed. I was very happy to be part of that change. I didn't think it was successful. Afterwards, I took over and I chaired the committee for a few years. I fear, however, we're slipping backwards a little bit. And again, this is not to be a criticism of the people there. Okay, they're asking interesting questions, but the question is, do they need to ask those questions? Okay, so when I think about leadership, okay, this is all about leadership. I said that's what we need to be focused on. So I think we need a university veterinarian and we need chairs of ethics committees that take more ownership of those meetings. Okay, somebody that sees the big picture. Okay, if there's somebody out there who understands the critical research programs and can direct those people on the committee to ask critical questions and not just ask questions for the sake of asking questions. Again, as I said, if you put 10 academics in a room, obviously they're going to generate lots and lots of questions about anybody's protocol. But the question is, do they actually need to be asking those questions? Okay, another story for you about ethics. Okay, several years ago, I started work on this fish here. This is a threatened lake sturgeon here in Saskatchewan, and I was working on it with a couple of my former PhD students who work at the Water Security Agency. And when it came time to getting our animal cares protocols put into place, okay, my collaborators laughed at me when I talked about sending our protocols to the university. They laughed and they said there's no way they're going to send it here. There was no question in their mind they were going to send it to the University of Regina. Now, all the people were based out of Saskatoon, not university, but at the Water Security Agency. They're based in Saskatoon, and yet our protocol was going to be administered through the University of Regina. Now, that story should give you pause. These are people not associated with the university, but they are obviously have a perspective about the way in which we are dealing with animal care administration. Okay, remember, every university in the country has to meet the same Canadian Council on Animal Care guidelines. Okay, so that means there shouldn't be huge differences across universities. So you have to ask yourself, what is the University of Regina doing different than what the University of Saskatchewan is doing? Okay, are we doing something right that they're doing wrong, or are we doing something wrong that they're doing right? Okay, perhaps it's a little bit of both. So if I had this portfolio, I could envision sitting on that committee for several months and assessing whether or not we need to change the culture. Okay, ask questions, facilitate the research, rather than ask questions for the sake of asking questions. Okay, I don't have any experience at all dealing with human ethics or with radiation safety, but I've understood that we've had similar issues there. So my talking with faculty would indicate that they have a bit of frustration here as well. Interestingly, though, I've heard some rather amazing things about our biosafety program. And so the way Andrea Schmida is running that biosafety program, I think that's wonderful. So perhaps there's some lessons there. Okay, the other focus of this portfolio obviously is about infrastructure. Okay, and so I see prioritizing long-term renewal of our critical infrastructure and equipment as vital to our success. Okay, I don't want to come across as somebody with an axe to grind or anything like that, but I do think we need to acknowledge the fact that we have some serious constraints with our infrastructure. Okay, this is my major research facility. This is the RJF Smith Center for Aquatic Ecology, and it has opened and closed its doors about 3 times over the past 12 years. Okay, I haven't been able to hold fish into this wonderful facility for a couple of years now. And if you're me, just imagine trying to design PhD projects for people when you have no consistent place to work. This no consistent place to work has been becoming very troubling for me. Okay, so I'm very troubled when I turn away self-funded graduate students. over the last decade or so, the number of self-funded graduate students I have turned away is really disturbing to me. Okay, and I hope our Dean of College of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies really listens to that one, close. So I think we need to get more infrastructure to help with the portfolio of the Dean of Grad Studies. My solution, what has my solution been? My solution is not a solution that I hope everybody takes at the university, but my solution is simple. Every year I get on a plane with my collaborator here from the Vet College. Okay, my collaborator is the one on the right. She's not the astronaut on the left. And every time we do this, we get on the plane and we go off to Australia. We go up to northern Queensland and fly out of Cairns and end up at the Lizard Island Research Station. And this is probably one of the best research stations in the world. And so it's an amazingly attractive place for us to come to do our work. Now, it's got some great advantages. Of course, I do research over there in their summer, so I get to sometimes switch views that look like this to sometimes views that look like this. And so Lizard Island's got these amazing varanid lizards running everywhere. Absolutely amazing, unless they start eyeing up your young children, which has happened to me. So that's a story for a different day. And perhaps also that you should realize they got these amazing coral reefs, and you could see some of the damselfish that we study there at the Lizard Island Research Station. Lots of the work I do is with Mark McCormick at James Cook University, and so Mark and myself and Maud Ferrari have been very successful in getting some funding from the Australian Research Council. Okay, this is essentially kind of like the equivalent of our NSERC, a little more like NSF perhaps. And we've had success getting a bit of money over the years, and really it turns out to be about $1 million with funds. Now the money not necessarily is relevant. What we're doing is not particularly relevant, but what is relevant is the fact that most all of that $1 million has gone into paying for bench fees and things like that, all that for graduate students and postdocs. Now, of course, one of the things that is very problematic for me is that these are not University of Saskatchewan graduate students. These are graduate students from James Cook University. So I feel like I'm building this engaged, thriving research culture, but in some ways it's for the wrong university. It's for James Cook University. Okay, this is the cost of not having adequate infrastructure. Okay, I have had to move my program elsewhere largely. Okay, and I hope that lots of other people are not doing the same thing, because we have to have this engaged research enterprise on this campus. So I think we need to have long-term renewal of our equipment and long-term renewal of critical infrastructure. Okay, so I know some departments have set money aside for renewal. In my department, we charged user fees and set money aside for things like this. Here's a confocal microscope. And I don't use microscopes at all really in my research, but I understand it's a critical component of research programs of other people in my department. So putting money away sounds exactly like we need to do in the eventuality that we need to repair this equipment or replace this equipment. Okay, but when budget cuts happen, as they've had over the last several years, our emergency funds have disappeared. Now, I do understand budget constraints. There's no question about that. But do we have the money? What happens when that money evaporates? We're kind of stuck with a liability. Okay, so is somebody prepared to pay the bill and the machine breaks? Okay, or if we need to replace that confocal microscope? What if they don't? What if programs grind to a halt? Will my colleagues have to look to other universities or look to other institutions to get their research done? Okay, perhaps we've got redundancy with microscopes. I know there's microscopes in several places around campus. Okay, but I don't know how much redundancy we have when we talk about things like tractors, critical infrastructure probably for lots of people, or when we talk about studio art facilities or whatever it happens to be that you need for your research. Okay, that critical research infrastructure for whatever individuals need. So I think what we need to do is we need to get units to identify key equipment, identify key facilities, and we need to get them to always be considering the maintenance cost and the cost of renewing those things. Okay, we need to engage our stakeholders and convince them that we need to have these contingency funds for the long term. These are not funds that can be vulnerable to the next budget crunch. Okay, there's always going to be a next budget crunch, and facilities will always need to be replaced and equipment will always be breaking. Okay, so we need to have long-term planning, and I can only emphasize that enough. Okay, we're going to need ways to incentivize people to get facilities and equipment that can be shared. Okay, let's just say that again. We need to get that incentivizing people to get those things. So from my experience, faculty often really respond positively to two things. They really respond positively to money, and they really respond positively to time. And in fact, if you ask lots of them, they actually prefer time over money. Okay, so perhaps something can be tweaked with our assignment of duties to really be a focus here for those people who are committed to getting research facilities and getting equipment that can be shared by the rest of us. So Dr. Singh's office posed this question to us. Again, what are the greatest challenges and opportunities related to research, scholar, and artistic work at the University of Saskatchewan? Okay, I've taken the opportunity to talk about these sort of challenges and opportunities. My strategy today was to tell you some stories, to identify some issues, and hopefully to find some creative solutions for those. Now, I hope my talk didn't come across as being too negative. I'm actually a really positive guy, but I just sat down and I tried to identify some pretty serious challenges that I think I've had in my career, and I think others have had in their career. Okay, other people may be having different challenges. Okay, clearly I think another big, huge challenge that we have to always get our head around is that we have to attract and retain excellent faculty. Of course, we're in an international market for faculty, and so we need to really have competitive salaries and benefits. And certainly over the last 15 years or so, we have become much more competitive with our salaries and compensation. Okay, our funding levels have gone up, our rankings have gone up, and our standards for promotion and tenure have gone up. It's not because we changed our standards. Our standards haven't changed really at a university level since probably 2004 or something like that. But these standards have shot up because we're hiring faculty that interpret the standards through a different lens of excellence. So we need to keep this up, and to remain competitive, we need to have a compensation strategy that really does attract excellent faculty. Okay, the next thing is all about money. Okay, we need to convince our stakeholders about the need for long-term commitments, long-term stable funding, particularly for infrastructure and those sorts of things. And I've talked a lot about lots of these issues that could be solved with money, but I'm not a naive person. I firmly believe this. I firmly believe that all universities should perpetually have money problems. And it doesn't matter what university you're talking about, all universities should perpetually have money problems. And the reason for that is simple. We've got excellent people. People have excellent ideas, and exploring those ideas takes money. And as a result, if you have a situation where the university is flush in money, then people are not exploring those ideas that they have enough. So I'm going to end with kind of a quote about money in this sense. This is a famous quote that's been flying around campus for quite a number of years, and that is, it's all about choice. Okay, so I'm just going to suggest that we choose to engage in a thriving research culture. That's where we should be sending lots of our resources. Okay, one final note about opportunities. Okay, this was about challenges and opportunities. I have to just end with the faculty. A university is the faculty and the students. Okay, so our strength is our faculty. We have 1,050 or so amazingly talented academics on this campus, and they have amazing ideas to contribute to this vibrant research culture that we have. So here's a view of some of them. Forget the guy talking there, but just look at all those amazing, talented academics pondering what it is that the then Dean of the College of Graduate Studies, or Dean of Arts and Science, was talking about. Okay, I just want to, one final thing. I know Dr. Singh started the acknowledgement that we're meeting here in Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. I want to end the same way. As we end, I just take you and ask you to take a moment to contemplate and reflect on that message that you see there. Okay, reflect on where you are in your life and where you are in the world. Thank you. Stay safe and remember to vote.
Thank you very much, Doug, for your presentation, and again, thank you. It's always speaks volumes when in an internal leadership role we have it's a service role. I mean, many colleagues come forward and they have ideas and they have seen the problems and opportunities really up front and center. They say, well, that's what my vision is. So really that tells us the health of the academy in a way. as to how engaged our colleagues are in providing opportunities to their colleagues through serving in these leadership roles. So that's what it is at the end of the day. It feels like yesterday, Doug, you and I were celebrating our promotion to full professors. We were in the same year, I think 2004, or seems so far back, and in some ways, and in sometimes it feels like yesterday. And so I now would be inviting questions and comments from the audience. As we have done with the first presentation, please raise your hand, and Christopher and I will see that, invite you to speak, and keep your question to one at a time so that we can go around the Zoom or the Teams squares that we have, and you can have an opportunity to ask the follow-up question later on. And so let's begin. Let us see who would like to go first. I see Dr. Oh, sorry, who went first there? Chris, did you? Dr. Mansfield Miller, I believe. And please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Doug? Thank you for your great presentation. I appreciate that. And I just want to say that for sharing that vision that you have is very inspiring. So we look forward to the process going forward. I did hear very clearly the frustrations you talked about in terms of ethics. And I hope you, as you mentioned, remain committed to channeling your frustrations to address the multiple problems if you're successful. Dealing with even the internal ethics approvals, which have actually become worse during the pandemic. I'm not going to share my own frustrations here, but as you know, most clinical health research depend on additional ethics approval from other stakeholders, such as Saskatchewan Health Authority, Correctional Services of Canada, and the likes. So specifically regarding external ethics permission and approval, my question is, what steps would you take to facilitate aligning U of S ethics and ethics approval from these stakeholders? Sorry about my phone behind the scene there.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for the question. I think the reality is sitting down with all of those stakeholders and having conversations and seeing whether you can align those things is an absolute fantastic idea. I don't know how much I don't have much experience in terms of ethics outside of the university in that thing, but I do have lots of experience with things like the provincial government and their approach to collection permits and those sorts of things. And this past year is a perfect example. We went and sent information about research permits, and they contacted us afterwards and said, you know, this is not really working for you. You're sending us too much paperwork. Maybe we have to redesign the forms and redesign the way in which we're doing things to facilitate the way your research program is working. Because usually we get one or two protocols, one or two issues where somebody wants to go collect an animal from a particular spot. Okay, my research program is much bigger than that. Okay, and so we're all over the province oftentimes collecting things, moving around, and so they were very, very happy to help us in that context. So I presume that same conversation can happen. If this is a frustration that is happening at other universities, and if we were able to get some information from other universities and ask whether or not they're having those same things, and then we can really probably facilitate a good conversation with those other ethics boards, whatever it happens to be. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Dr. Curtis Swekla.
Hi, Curtis.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for the presentation there. So part of the role of the position, as you emphasized with your presentation, is sort of overseeing the animal care committee and helping direct that in some manner. Yourself being a rather heavy animal researcher, and your collaborator being a heavy researcher in the animal world, I was wondering how you balance the fact that you're both using animals a lot, right? and the responsibility to oversee the committee and the potential for conflict of interest, whether it's perceived or real, and how you handle that.
Well, I think obviously any conversation about any animal care protocol that I submit or my close collaborators submit, obviously would step away and let the committee do that. I'm not really interested in getting in and participating in every single animal care ethics one or radiation safety one. I'm just more interested in getting in and kind of changing the culture. And again, I hope it didn't come across as highly negative, because I think people are really working hard. They're asking fantastic questions, but really the reality is lots of times they don't have to ask those questions. Okay, they can ask those questions over the phone, they can ask those questions, and they just really shouldn't have to answer the same question over and over and over again. It just becomes a little bit of a waste of people's time, I think, in that sense. So very clearly, I could separate my life and my research from the rest of the committee, and as I'm sure you must do, I'm sure that's what Dr. Singh must do, and all of us in that sense. Yeah, so I have no question with that at all.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Curtis, I see your hand up. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, not really a follow-up, but another one, since nobody else is jumping in.
Yeah.
So Doug, it was something you were talking about at the beginning about recruiting and retention of new faculty, and it's something that I've heard the frustrations from new faculty as well in terms of the infrastructure in particular that's on campus. And sometimes they come onto campus, that they get their interviews, they might visit a location here or there, and then when they arrive, it's a little different than what they thought it was, right? And then there's that frustration of however many years to build up their program before they can really hit the ground running. So I was wondering your take, perhaps maybe a little bit more specific, on how that can be ameliorated so that when they're being hired and when they're going through the recruitment process, they know exactly what our campus can offer to them in reality, both when they arrive and then in 2-5 years down the line as their grants come to full fruition and they're able to sort of build their research program.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think one of the things I've noticed over the years is that topic has changed a little bit for those in the sciences, particularly in College of Medicine, perhaps even in a little bit in arts and science, because we've changed the models a little bit in the sense of infrastructure. So we used to have individuals to own their own research lab, and they used to really love the fact that they owned space, and they oftentimes associated their status with how much space they had and those sorts of things. And then we moved away from that, and we get away from that, and we move more towards shared labs and those sorts of things. So if you look at the CSRB, if you look at the College of Medicine, much more of a shared model. And I think when that happened, I heard less and less frustration from people because they had some place to go. Okay, but I do think we have to get our head around it. I had at least 20 people on this campus have come to me and said, should I delay submitting my NSERC grant in the first year I'm here? And the reason was they thought they're going to be behind. They're not going to have a research facility ready to go. And so are they asking that question? Should I not even bother submitting my grant until year 2? Well, the way Tri-Council's grant your work, you're sort of in a special category as a new researcher right off the bat, and perhaps you need to have 2 cracks at it to get your first grant. So obviously I tell them, yeah, we really want you to get a grant right at the very beginning, but you need to like, I don't say pound on the table, but you certainly need to express your frustration, and you need to express the fact that your research program is being impaired if you don't have a facility to work at. And so I do think we need to really clearly focus on that. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I mean, in a light-hearted way, Curtis, we try to recruit our colleagues in the summer and days like this. Then comes the winter. So of course there is a difference when when they're on campus, when they really live through a Saskatchewan winter. And but the point you make is, I also noticed one thing which is very simple actually. When we send recommendation from the department to the dean to the provost for appointment of a new faculty member, it's very simple. Research office has no idea what type of research infrastructure their colleague needs. It's a very simple thing. And if the research office and the new AVP knows what this scholar is going to need 12 months from now, we will be getting ready to do that. And another piece is, we never begin engaging with a colleague after they have signed the contract to join the University of Saskatchewan till they actually arrive on campus. We need to be getting the conversation underway from the research office very quickly. So let me go over to Dr. Walter Sequeira for his question or comment, please.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Doc. Can you hear me? Yep.
Okay. Yep.
So thank you, Doc, for your presentation. I really like, and this you are applying for a very challenging portfolio that is infrastructure and ethics. That is two major issues in any university. And since you made so many episodes of during your career, I remember when in 2012, when University of Toronto tried to recruit me there, and they present me for a building of 30 million buildings, this CFI that they built there. And they said to me, have all the space here because we don't have people to work in this building. I said, oh my God, what kind of a crazy thing that is, you give to me any space of this $30 million building, and this because they don't have people to work there, but the CFI, as you know, provide all the infrastructure and all the equipment, but don't support the operating grant is different thing. So what I noted here at the University of Saskatchewan is, especially in the health science building, is that of course, infrastructure always will be a problem, but we have a kind of a fair infrastructure in terms of facilities, in terms of equipment. But in the same time, I noted that we have this model that is a share lab, I really like that. But in the same time, I saw that there is no accountability, and also is absolutely empty, the labs in the health science building. That is, if you walk anytime, I'm not talking about the pandemic only, but I'm talking before the pandemic, is absolutely empty with the infrastructure is there, but is in the same time we cannot use because it's so many clusters. So I'd like to understand from you how you can, in your portfolio, to help the health science, the biomedical science, to use this facility and to use this space, because the machine that we buy today, in 2 years, 3 years from now, is obsolete, and we need to buy a new one. So we needed to generate papers, to generate data, to apply for grants, to buy new machines. So how we can facilitate this in the health science building?
Well, a great question. Yeah, I mean, the reality is, if the building is underutilized, then I think what we need to get our head around is the fact that we need more active researchers in the College of Medicine. So I told you a story about somebody who left the College of Medicine. Very sad, had a huge research program going. It was very sad to me to watch that person go. And so I think we need to, if you think about the funding part, we need to figure out a way to get more active researchers getting more and more funding. And as soon as you get more and more funding, those people will hire more postdocs, they'll hire more graduate students, and that place would fill up. And hopefully it's so full that we need to be talking about building another College of Medicine building. I mean, that's the vision. It grows so much. If you look at the university plan and you look at the amount of funding that is generated by our College of Medicine versus other ones in the U15, it is just very, very small. And so I do believe we need to really emphasize and really do everything we can to get the College of Medicine going. And that is good for everybody on campus. That's not just good for College of Medicine. That's going to free up resources for the rest of the university to be able to do whatever it is that they need to do. So in that sense, attracting and retaining and great scholars in that, and really, again, I think we need, at this university, we need a postdoc program. I don't think there's any question about that. We need to get somebody who can maybe not pay the whole bill, but somebody who can, maybe you can get half a postdoc paid for, something just to get enough of a critical thing going. And then I guess the other thing in College of Medicine, probably more there than elsewhere on campus, we need to figure out the way to hire people probably in research clusters and get people working together collaboratively, because lots of those CIHR grants are not something an individual can write. They can't pull off a CIHR grant necessarily always on their own. And certainly all of the other components and those people around it will be the ones that sort of really add to that. And so maybe there's a couple of answers. I ponder that one a little bit more, and something else gets to me, I'll get back to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Christopher, I think there was a comment that came to you, and then Dr. Christy Morrissey has a question or a comment as well. I don't know which one came first. So
the chat came first, so I'll read
chat
that
came
one.
first. Okay, let's go with that. And then Dr. Morrissey will ask her question.
So the question is from Tanya Warchenko. Dr. Chivers, my question is, what do you think it will take to nurture the engaged research culture that you envision in fine and performing arts, social sciences, and humanities? Are there any approaches you would take in this regard that you haven't already touched on?
Yeah, well, I mean, the answer to that question is it's a little bit of an unknown to me. I'm a scientist. I've lived my entire life in the science group. And so in that sense, I don't really have a great answer. Probably we emphasize funding a lot more in the sciences and those sorts of things than elsewhere. There's probably lots of people who don't need huge amounts of research to funds to do whatever they do. They do amazing things with just a pen and paper and ideas in their head, and that's about all they need. And so access to libraries, that kind of stuff. But I don't. I mean, my skill is going to be as a listener. So I will come in and listen to what people think they need and try to put it all in perspective. Certainly, if people don't have a place to art facilities, or they don't have what it is that they need, then we can't be a science university only. If we're going to be a science university, we need to get rid of all these departments and colleges. But we're going to do that. We're going to be supporting the whole entire research enterprise right across the campus. So I guess the answer is a little bit of a non-answer. I'd listen and try to figure out whatever it is that I could do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Christy. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for your engaging and obviously, I would say, thought-provoking presentation, which I enjoyed watching. So I have two questions. One more kind of a personal one, and then maybe one if I have leverage from Dr. Singh to ask a second one, if there's time, on the animal ethics as chair. The first one is just around infrastructure and the fact that you mentioned about user fees and how that is an important strategy to maintain sort of continuity of maintenance of facilities and infrastructure, right? So whatever those may be. And I wanted to ask you your opinion or your thoughts about user fees and the differences in user fees across the campus. So in my own case, I know that animal user fees in different facilities, they vary. And what your thoughts are about how to, equalize those or to make them more fair and transparent, but also to as your point has been made about increasing, research capacity and for various researchers. How do we address the rising infrastructure user fees that are constraining researchers from doing their important and great work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought about that a lot in my own case, in my own career, about user fees. So I pay large user fees when I go to some research stations, no question about that. I don't have any objection to the fact that we should be paying user fees. I think we should be paying user fees, but I do think universities and faculty cannot be responsible for paying the whole bill. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Not my last grant, but the previous NSERC grant I got was through the Ecology and Evolution Group. It was a $50,000 research grant. At the time, that was the largest grant in College and Evolution that came to the university. Okay, not anymore. I know you, for example, have the bigger one. So, but in that $50,000, when I got looking at my facility and how much money it would take for me to use my facility for a given year, it came out to somewhere around $34,000. Okay, that would be the user fees to use all of the equipment that I basically got grants to have there. So $34,000, if that disappears and I want to hire about one graduate student and have to pay that one graduate student, pretty soon I can only ever really have a single graduate student on a $50,000 NSERC. Okay, if I do, it's gone next time. Okay, I'm piddly one next time. But really, if a third of our grant is based on HQP, I need to be able to direct funding towards other things, and it can't all go to facilities. So we need to have a situation where we're paying user fees, but we don't necessarily have to pay the whole entire bill. There has to be some kind of centralized funding for kind of critical large infrastructure. And I'm sure you can probably find the same thing in agriculture, probably the same thing for your bird facility. I imagine it's the exact same thing, huge amount of money. And again, of course, the other part of this is we need to be a little bit more diverse in terms of where we're getting our funding from. And so perhaps there's more funding that's out there and available. And again, go back to the idea, getting that critical infrastructure, perhaps giving people some kind of release, some kind of incentive, maybe not a merit system, but maybe more like teacher releases, those sorts of things, for those people who are committed to getting us facilities and committed to sharing those facilities with everybody. So I think that's what we need to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't see any other hands up, so this might be the last question for this session. Christy, go ahead, please.
Okay, I'll just ask a quick one about the animal ethics or the research ethics. And so as you know, or for the audience, I am the chair of one of the co-chairs for the animal ethics, and I'm new in that, fairly new in that role. And one concern I have that, sort of as you've presented it, is that this is a barrier for, the ethics process is a major barrier for researchers to do their work. How do you foresee balancing the requirements and the, to follow the CCAC, for example, or all the other research ethics guidelines that are mandatory, and they often involve a lot of paperwork. How do you manage, I guess, or balance for researchers communicating that is required while still as you say, streamlining or making this less of a barrier? Because paperwork is a barrier, and it without a doubt it is a barrier for all of us, but it is also a necessary barrier. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. I hope it doesn't come across as I always think just the animal care is always getting in people's way. That's certainly not what I think. Certainly over the years, I've had lots of university veterinarians talk to me and provide great feedback and helpful things and provide education for my students if I needed. And so hopefully it doesn't come across as all sort of negative in that sense. But I just go back to changing the culture of it, where you are trying to come to the committee with the idea of facilitating and helping, okay? And I'm not sure we should think of it as a failure if somebody's protocol doesn't get approved, but if there is something that is that striking to a chair of the committee or something striking to the veterinarian or something that is so striking to the person leading that, they should be able to contact the people before and really find out, okay, am I missing something? What is the real critical thing? Because I think we may have a real problem here. And so we really should be trying to strive to get lots of that stuff kind of done beforehand and come into those committees and hopefully just facilitate. And again, faculty are amazing at generating questions. I put a protocol in front of people and sure, they can generate a whole bunch of questions. But in my experience, I've answered a question from the Animal Care Committee once and the next time and the next time. And the question is, if somebody was really in charge of really taking ownership of that committee, then maybe they would be able to say, that may be a question that's very interesting. We probably answered that question already, and maybe we don't need to spend that time asking that question. So it's a culture thing I'm trying to get at, I think.
Yeah, I'll just end by adding that I think that that's the danger of, we don't want it to be a culture of negativity, that it's always a barrier. I think it has to be promoted as a culture of improving research, for the benefit of researchers and the benefit of the institution and the benefit of, in this case, animals that are used in research, rather than just purely a paper pushing exercise or a barrier. So I'd emphasize that. I think that, certainly that's why I'm involved in it. So anyways, just some final thoughts. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you very much for this very engaging and positive discussion. Truly underlying current is that we are at University of Saskatchewan, which is 115-year-old institution of higher learning. And we are so proud of the academy that we have and the contribution that this university has made locally and globally. And what an interesting opportunity at that window in time where we are. And when we can do truly amazing work at University of Saskatchewan with the infrastructure we have, with the people we have, and that is staff, students, faculty members, and truly Saskatchewanians who are standing behind this university. So this opportunity is ours to grab collectively, and really appreciate all this discussion, which helps me a lot as your new in this new role, and all this discussion continues to educate me more and more about the passion that you all have. So with this, a couple of housekeeping notes while I will get to thank Doug in a moment, is that these presentations will be recorded. You can listen to them, watch them later on, and encourage all of our colleagues to do the same. And Christopher is going to put a feedback forum or a link in the chat right now. You have up to September 24th to do that. I would really appreciate committees make as good a decision as is the feedback from members who are outside of the committee. So your input is absolutely critical, and I hope you will encourage our colleagues to listen to these discussions and send in their comments to the committee. And this also brings us to the conclusion of today's presentation. I am again expressing my gratefulness to the candidates who have put their name forward. And Doug, thank you so very much. Great to hear your passion for making a positive difference in the area of ethics and infrastructure, which we know is a major pinch point at our university. I think we can unleash our creativity by few percentage points simply by making our infrastructure and the ethics system work better for our researchers, for our graduate students, for our postdocs, and for our staff that actually makes those entities tick day in, day out. And so truly, thank you so very much, Doug, for your presentation. And colleagues, this concludes the presentation. I wish you a happy rest of the day, and thank you so very much. Bye now.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Thank you, everyone.